We are back live from Washington State. What's next for Watson and Darnold? What's the offseason hold for Newton and the rest of the NFL? And the Super Bowl ready to go? I'm going to give you my thoughts on how the game is played. Let's first talk about Watson and his best places to go. Well, really, San Francisco, if you got Deshaun Watson, man, you would be a Super Bowl team immediately. Your defense is going to be great. You got George Kittle. You got Ayuk. Your team would be very, very solid with Deshaun Watson. There's no future with Jimmy Garoppolo. And with Watson stepping in at that quarterback position, the possibilities are endless. That is a Super Bowl team, and in the NFC, probably the best team. The Packers, they can't seem to get it done in the NFC, and with Aaron Rodgers possibly on the move, and the Seattle Seahawks, I mean, they're not doing anything. The Niners could be the best team in the NFC if they were to get Watson. Other places he could go. He wants to go to the Jets more than the Dolphins. Those were two options out there. I understand the Dolphins. I don't think the Dolphins really give up Tua. That's just my personal opinion. I just don't see why they would hype this quarterback up so much and love him so much and then just give him up, especially for Watson. You know, he doesn't want to play there. He'd rather play in New York. Now, people say that's not a very good idea, but I disagree wholeheartedly. The Jets have a great draft pick. They can get Devontae Smith. The Dolphins might get him. He's going to go very high, which is very weird for a receiver, but he will go high. If the Jets got him, they would be insane. You'd have Deshaun Watson. You'd have Devontae Smith. And you've got an all-right O-line and a defense that's promising. That's a good team right there. I don't think as good as the Niners, or even as good as the Dolphins in that sense. But I don't think that they're a bad team at all. I think they go to the playoffs. With years to come, and if Deshaun Watson becomes that franchise quarterback in New York, the possibilities are endless. And I think those are great places for him to land. A rumor that was going around was that he was going to Pittsburgh. And honestly, that would probably be his second best fit. I think San Francisco would be his first. I think Pittsburgh would be his second. And I think the New York Jets would be his third. Unless they drop all these players on this offseason, I don't see how they could get Watson and pay him. With Marquise Pouncey likely retiring, and with Big Ben a year behind, Watson could step in and be a great quarterback. They did just sign Dwayne Haskins, which is a very interesting move. I've got a lot of faith in him, which not a lot of people do. He's made dumb decisions, but I think he can bounce back and possibly be a starter in future years for Pittsburgh. Will he be a starter this year? No, and he shouldn't be. He's on a one-year contract, and it's obviously to see how he plays behind Big Ben if he were to stay another year. Let's talk about Sam Darnold next. Now, this guy has been through everything in New York. He has a lot of potential in a lot of quarterbacks' eyes. And being on New York, if you're not Deshaun Watson, and if you don't get Devontae Smith, you don't get a good O-line, I mean, you're not going to be seen as a great quarterback. Landing spots for him, it's almost the same as Watson. You can go to Pittsburgh. You were thrown into the NFL, almost immediately. And then bench for Joe Flacco towards the middle of the season. If they were to get Sam Darnold, I think Big Ben stays another year and Sam Darnold plays behind Big Ben and becomes a good quarterback. The Steelers don't have the best receiving core. Juju isn't a bad receiver. Deontay Johnson drops a lot of balls. There's Ray McLeod out there. There's a lot of people, McFarland. But it's a better receiving core than the New York Jets. A lot of places that he could go to. Detroit with Matthew Stafford, there's a lot of talk there. You go to Chicago. I mean, these people all need quarterbacks. Now, if you go to Chicago and you lose Allen Robinson, it's almost as if you're the Jets. I mean, it's not. If the New York Jets somehow pull off a trade where they get Sam Darnold to Chicago for Allen Robinson, and then they get Deshaun Watson, and then they get Devontae Smith, that's a freaking great team. I mean, look at it. You got the Heisman winner, and you got Allen Robinson, who's a star-studded receiver with Mitchell Trubisky throwing to him. And don't get me wrong, Mitchell Trubisky isn't bad at all, but Allen Robinson has more potential. I mean, you look at Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. These guys are great, but you got Kirk Cousins throwing to you. There's a lot more potential that can be there. Minnesota's another landing spot. These players or these teams need quarterbacks. New England could get Sam Darnold. New England could get Deshaun Watson. Be very scary if New England got Deshaun Watson. But I mean, the rest of their team is terrible. The New England Patriots are just not a very good team right now. Their defense is all right. Gilmore's obviously great. Either way, wherever Sam Darnold and Deshaun Watson end up, it'll be very, very interesting to see what team they play for. Next topic we got is Cam Newton in this offseason, and the rest of the NFL too. Let's talk about Cam Newton to start off. Is it time for Cam Newton to retire? Should he try to go to another team? Does New England keep him? I mean, there's so many options. But in my opinion, he's going to be a backup quarterback almost anywhere he goes. If I'm San Francisco, I'm not looking at him. I'm looking at big targets like Deshaun Watson. I'm looking at Sam Darnold. I'm looking at Matthew Stafford. I'm looking at bigger targets. Aaron Rodgers might be on the move. I'm looking at him. I'm doing anything I can. If I'm San Francisco, I'm Chicago, I'm Detroit, I'm Pittsburgh, I'm New York. I'm doing anything I can. So when you take Cam Newton in perspective, in the season that he had, it wasn't very impressive. I mean, he threw about 7 or 8 touchdowns in total, or at home, one of the two. I mean, that's not good. When you hype yourself up all off season, you're lifting all these weights, you're posting on Instagram, you're posting on social media saying, it's my time. They doubted me and all this. Yeah, we're going to doubt you, and we're still going to doubt you after this year because you played terribly in your NFL season as a starting quarterback under Bill Belichick, one of the best quarterbacks, under Bill Belichick, one of the best coaches in the NFL. I mean, there's no excuse for that. There's no excuse for that. And I personally, if I'm Cam Newton, I retire because teams aren't going to be looking at you. And if they are, it's for a backup quarterback. Let's talk about the rest of the NFL in this offseason and who's in rebuild mode. Well, let's talk about the Detroit Lions, per se. Matthew Stafford wants out, and I believe they're going to part ways.
They did.
Thank you. Matthew Stafford wants out, and they just parted ways. This is big, big news if you're someone that's looking for a quarterback. Detroit is in a very bad spot. I think Matthew Stafford is easily their best player that they could trade and to get the most value out of. But geez, if you're the Detroit Lions, you're in rebuild mode big time. Let's talk about the Chicago Bears. Man, you're not really getting anywhere. You really aren't. Going to the playoffs and anything, and you just get knocked out. Your team is like, you shouldn't even be allowed in the playoffs. Your team is not the best. You got Trubisky, who had a great last 2 or 3 weeks, but you need that all season if you want to go places. I wouldn't say they'd be in rebuild mode, but man, if you lose Robinson and if you don't get a quarterback this offseason, you're in rebuild mode. People are going to want out of Chicago. It's simple like that. Now let's talk about Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, very interesting offseason for them. They have a lot of contracts like TJ Watt that they should sign, or Big Ben, what's he going to do with his future? Marquise Pouncey's about to, I believe, retire. Your defense, Minka Fitzpatrick, you sign him again. Joe Hayden. There's a lot of moves that Pittsburgh can make, and not necessarily in a rebuild mode, but with getting Dwayne Haskins, it kind of seems like it could be going that way. Now, the New York Jets have been rebuilding for years, 3 or 4 years, and now you're at the spot, you're at the place where you don't really have to worry anymore. You've got people, you got Watson that wants to be there. You got a lot of money, you got a lot of cap space, you've got a high draft pick. I mean, Jets fans, you should be excited. Your rebuild mode is almost done. It's almost finished. Yes, you're still going to be in rebuild mode, and with how this offseason goes and Watson, wherever he wants to go, and Devontae Smith and how that works out, it's going to be interesting to see what the New York Jets can do out of this offseason. Let's talk a little bit about the Vikings. You gotta trade some people. Justin Jefferson is of high trade value, and I would keep him if I were you, Minnesota. But Adam Thielen, or maybe even Dalvin Cook, I mean, you got Kirk Cousins. They have big contracts, obviously, so whoever takes them is going to obviously have to pay that contract. But these are guys that you need to trade for the rest of your team to be good. You got to get Kirk Cousins out of there, man. Kirk Cousins, you guys are only winning games. Vikings are only winning games when Kirk Cousins is throwing for over 300 yards. Not when Dalvin Cook's for running for over 240. People say they put him on his back, or he put the team on his back, but really in reality they aren't winning the game. Yes, obviously if you feed a running back 60 times a game, 60 carries, you're going to have the outcome of 240 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. But what's your defense going to do to respond? How's Kirk Cousins going to do? Is he going to throw 2 interceptions? I mean, these are game changers, momentum changers, and that's all football. That's what football is all about, is momentum. Last team I'm going to touch base on, there's many teams that are still in rebuild mode, but I think the most interesting that people are really forgetting about is Arizona. You got DeAndre Hopkins and Kyler Murray, and you don't make the playoffs. You got Buda Baker on defense, and you're really just a great team overall, a good team overall, because if they were great, they would have made the playoffs. What do you do this offseason? Who do you try to sign? Look at Bud Dupree, great edge rusher for the Pittsburgh Steelers with a season-ending torn ACL. he could have been a defensive player of the year right up there with TJ Watt. I mean, he has many sacks, as many hits at the quarterback. He was doing great. He's one of the biggest reasons that Pittsburgh really just started to decline after, week 6 or 7? If I'm Arizona, I go for another edge rusher. I go for someone big like that, I might go for another offensive lineman so Kyler Murray doesn't have to drop back. You need to let your good quarterback, your great quarterback, work with one of the best, if not the best in the game, DeAndre Hopkins. My last topic that we're going to talk about today, let's talk about the Super Bowl. Going to be very, very exciting. You got the GOAT versus what people are calling the baby GOAT, and I'm all for it. Now, I've talked all about the Buccaneers. I personally did not think they would get to the Super Bowl or even get past round 2. And that's because they were a wild card team. I mean, I was very scared because in the regular season they didn't do too well. They could have been a lot better in the regular season, and they just weren't. Simply because of what? You got Tom Brady, you got Antonio Brown you signed late, you got Ronald Jones, you got Leonard Fournette, one of the best receiving corps, a great defense who showed it against the Packers in the NFC Championship. You should be easily walking in the Super Bowl, but they really had to fight to get here. Kansas City, on the other hand, I mean, they just handed Josh Allen the biggest L he's probably taken all season. Josh Allen did fine, but not as he should have, not as good as Josh Allen could have been. When the deep ball to Diggs doesn't happen like you want it to, your team starts to crumble. You don't throw to McKenzie as much. You don't throw to Beasley as much. You don't throw to Brown, who's hurt half the season. You can't run the ball. You haven't been able to run the ball all season. So, I mean, the Bills really saw the true side of them. The Chiefs and Andy Reid really thought of a great game plan and executed it perfectly against the Buffalo Bills. They stopped the deep ball. Now what do you have to do? They stopped the run themselves almost. I mean, all you got to do is cover slants and drags and posts. Sure, you got Tyrann Mathieu back there. Have fun with that. And look what happened. Now, Kansas City and Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl. I'm going to take Tampa Bay in this one. And I think it's going to be a very, very, very close game. But honestly, Tom Brady is the greatest of all time. There's no arguing it. A lot of missed calls happened against the Packers and the Buccaneers. But I loved it. They let them play football. They let them play football to where, these small calls that they're missing, it wouldn't have affected the game that much. If anything, it would have slowed down each team's momentum. That's why it was such a good game. I'm going to take Tampa Bay solely because of their defense. Their defense did great against the number 1 offense, and with the 2 best offensive linemen probably in the NFL on the Green Bay Packers, they did great. They had Aaron Rodgers had over 20 dropbacks. They sacked him about 5 or 6 times. He threw an interception. I mean, this is the number 1 offense we're talking about. Yes, Devontae Adams still had a great game. Of course he did. He's a great receiver, and he's got Aaron Rodgers thrown to him. But you slowed him down. At the end of the game, when Aaron Rodgers is what he's known for, coming back, throwing deep balls, getting them to the players, calling great plays, you had like 3 or 4 3 and outs. That's insane for the Bucs. That's great. And now you're going against the Kansas City Chiefs, who have a great offense, have more weapons, and have a great quarterback. Not better than Aaron Rodgers, but have a great Patrick Mahomes, baby GOAT. It's going to be a great game regardless, but I'm going to take Tampa Bay. As a wise man once said, defense wins championships. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I hope you liked this video, and make sure to subscribe and share this video with anyone you can. I'll see you guys in the next one.